Hello, beautiful souls. Today's episode is so good. And before we jump in, I have some exciting news to share. If you've ever wondered where you're blocking money, this is for you. I've created a free quiz to diagnose your money wounds so you can heal them and unblock yourself to receive more money. Just go to moneywoundsquiz.com and answer 6 quick questions to get your insanely accurate and potent result. And if you're loving my vibe and want to work one-on-one to call in more feminine energy wealth, I would love to hear from you. You can shoot me a DM on social media or go to emilywilcox.com to learn more. All right, Keri Stanley, I am so thrilled to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for being here.
You're so welcome, Emily. I'm excited to have this conversation. I love what you're up to, what you're creating, and the message that you're getting out there. So I couldn't be more thrilled to support and have this conversation with you.
Yes, I am so excited too. And before we dive in, I consider you a friend and a fellow mastermind sister, but I want to make sure that our listeners know who they get the pleasure of listening to today. So Keri Stanley is the CEO of Keri Stanley Coaching, and she's an inspirational speaker. As a top female life and performance coach, her passion is helping women leaders to create space to lead their lives fulfilled and on fire as they rise in their career. Facilitating global retreats, online masterminds, and executive leadership coaching, Keri works with leaders across the world to align their life to create the greatest impact. As a mother of teenage twin boys, a marathon runner, and a personal development junkie, Keri is always creating a life of fulfilling adventure across the globe. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Yeah, you can just tell from that introduction how much passion you have for your own life. And I know that there's going to be so much juicy stuff for us to dig into, because anytime I'm talking to someone that is self-employed, that has built their own business, I just know that there were so many limiting beliefs that had to be busted along the way in order for you to get to where you are today. So let's dive right into that, because you've shared with me a few of the limiting beliefs you had around, your ability to be successful. So tell me about those.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is when we'll just start right in there in the moment, because when I walked away from my corporate career, I had a 6-figure income. I was a single mom of twin boys, and that was 3 years ago this month that I walked away. And wow. I knew that when I walked out the door at that moment, I knew that I was taking a massive risk. It was a leap of faith. I mean, a true leap of faith. And just to be completely authentic in terms of numbers, in that moment, the year prior, I had created $24,000 in my business, $24,000. And that did not include expenses. That was revenue, top line revenue. That was not expenses. And so I wasn't making anything that would actually sustain my family and my kids. And I lived in a large house, that, all of those things. And so I knew that I was taking a risk, but I also knew that I was being called to it. And there was a piece of me that knew that I needed to burn the boats, that I needed to jump off the cliff, and I needed to build the parachute on the way down. And I knew I was walking into something that was going to be a stretch for me. And so it was that piece of it. And part of what had delayed me for so long was that I grew up in a family, and if you look at the lineage of my family, there actually is entrepreneurs in my family. However, they were always the men, and they were always supported by the women. So the women made the money, the women held everything down. So you had a choice. You could follow your passion and have someone else support you and be happy and all of those things, or you could be the workhorse and bring home the money and support and all of that. And traditionally, the role was that the women supported and the men had the passion and the freedom and all of that, but they didn't come as one. So I was the first female in the family that wasn't with a partner at the time. That was because I'd gone through a divorce. And so it was me melding into one person that was standing for, I can create it all. And my family was nervous as hell. Like just nervous because they hadn't seen it before. And so like my mom, one of the first things she said was like, oh my gosh, what are you going to do about health insurance? All the questions that come up.
Yeah.
And so I had to get over that I was doing something a new way, that there was resources out there, that I couldn't look at the past. And so that was one of the biggest limiting beliefs that I got to get over. And then the other thing was just the fact that I come from small town Missouri. I come from a town of, the Midwest, where it's farmers, where it's, blue collar. And so I was not raised in a community of, creative entrepreneurs living in this type of a life. And it was a town of 900 people. So what I was exposed to was not what I was stepping into. So I constantly was having to say, like, I'm creating something new that just hasn't been my normal day-to-day exposure, but I still get to follow my intuition.
Ooh, I love that. And I can relate so much to your story. I grew up in a very small town in Michigan, very blue collar. I also 3 years ago this month left corporate America.
We have the same anniversaries?
Yes. And, I had a $150,000 a year job with all the perks, the car, the 401k, yada, yada, yada. And it felt scary as hell. And I did have a partner. Now, granted, we were both stepping into entrepreneurship, but I can also relate to what you're saying about your family being worried. And my family kind of felt that same way. And it's a struggle when you feel still a little shaky in your decision. And then the people who love you and are around you feel very shaky in your decision. So it sounds like you really had to call in some next level trust in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the biggest things, one of the two smartest things I would say that I did. One is I surrounded myself with a community of people that had gone before me. Mm-hmm. So I let my family know what I was doing, but they weren't my sounding boards when I was making decisions.
Yes.
They were my informants after the fact, when I could stand in the decision, so that they could feel the confidence in me.
Yeah.
And shakiness went to the people that had been in the situation before. So that was one of the smartest things for me to do. The second smartest thing for me to do was at the moment that I turned in my resignation, because my resignation was based off of a sign that I had received from God that it was time to leap, that it was a clear time to cut the ties and go. And so I knew in that moment and committed in that moment to have my strongest spiritual relationship with God grounded in faith that I had ever had. And so I made my spiritual life a commitment and a priority in a way I had never done before, because I knew we were going to walk through some stuff. And if I didn't have that, I knew I'd give up on myself.
Yeah.
So those were the two things that I committed to, that I stood on, that no matter how bad it got, no matter how scary it got, those were the two places that I always went first. They became my anchors, and they are what kept me going.
I love that. Yeah. And when you were surrounding yourself with people who had gone before you, was that through a paid mastermind or paid coaching, or was it just a curated network?
Both.
Okay.
So I had a business coach with masterminds, people like you, because there was a few stages where I was in a couple different communities. So that I was surrounded with, but also I had communities that stayed in contact with, that was the curated network.
Yeah.
and even other people that I met, like I started calling in more and more people that were either supporting my vision or had been there before, and that I could be authentic with and say, if I was in a mess and here's what it was. I had so many people say, oh, I've been there. It's really not as bad as you think. It may feel really bad, but it's really not as bad as you think. I've been there. Keep going. I know what you're doing,
Yeah.
So that just became critical. So it was both. I had paid and unpaid.
Yeah. So the year prior, your business had brought in $24,000 total gross revenue. You left your job in March. What did that first year of full-time entrepreneurship look like?
Yeah. So that first year I ended up creating right at 75,000. So I went from 25,000 to 75,000 that first year. And I still had, for the first part of it, I still had a little bit of, comfort, because I still had my, the first few months of the year still had my 6-figure income coming in. And then I had another 3 to 4 months where I was still getting paid out some. So overall, I still was landing about the same as where I had been. And I'll be honest, I was already in quite a bit of debt because of investing that I had made before. So what happened for me was all of that caught up to me on year 2.
Okay.
So that's where it really caught up. So year 2 was definitely my most difficult year, which would have been 2019, like the full of 2019 into part of 2020. And I remember two real critical moments. One was I remember it was like October, and I had a day where I was like, I don't know that things can get any worse. My kids were eating peanut butter and jelly. It was wondering, I'd never been in that situation where you're wondering, like, if any money's going to come in whatsoever, how am I going to pay for the gas bill, the electric bill, the groceries, all of those things. And I just kept going. And I was dealing with, overdraft accounts, which I'd never had in my entire life. Just like all of that was happening. And there was a moment where the day before, I'll tell you a quick spiritual conversation. The day before, I was like, I don't know that I can take much more. And God spoke to me very clearly and said, I need you to go. Like, he actually sent me to a church that day. And it was in the afternoon. It was a Friday afternoon. And when I went there, I just followed. It wasn't even a church. I didn't even go to a physical church at that time. And I didn't understand why I was going. But I just followed because I was in that pit, that pit where you're just like, I don't know what else to do. And I'm hearing this. It sounds crazy, but I'm going to go. And long story short, I went in, and it was a Friday afternoon. I go in, hardly anybody's there. I went into the sanctuary. It was a new building that had been built, and it was pitch black. I mean, like pitch black. I couldn't see anything. And the people that were there, they didn't offer to turn the lights on for me. It was a big auditorium. I didn't know where the lights were. And so I stood there at the doorway of this gigantic black auditorium. And right when I was standing there, I just was like, gosh, do I find the lights? And I hear this voice. It was like a whisper, internal voice for me that just said, leave the lights off. Leave the lights off. And so I started walking in the dark, and I turned on the little flashlight in my phone just so I could see. And I started taking a step and then another step. And all I could see was one step at a time. And as I made my way to the front, I thought I was going to sit down in like the front row of the congregation. But I felt led to just go up the stairs and then go sit on the stage and look out. And I heard this voice say, this is where you are right now. You feel like you're in the dark. You feel like you can't see anything. You're lost, and you're like looking for the lights. All you need is this amount of light to see one step at a time. I just need you to keep going, because what I'm building for you is this new building that was just built is exactly what I'm building in the world for you. You're exactly where you're meant to be. You only need to see one step, but we're getting ready to fill these seats for you. You're getting ready to speak on international stages. It's all being built for you while I'm building you. While I'm building you. And so everything got stripped away so that I could no longer depend on the things that I was clinging to for safety. And so I just got asked, can you trust me? And so I remember just like bawling and being like, okay, I'll keep going. I trust you. I don't get it. All of that. But the very next day, all my bank accounts got shut down. All of them. And I just was like, okay, I fell to the floor. I literally was at this point that I was like, I've got nothing. Everything's been shut down. I don't even have access to anything. And I had one account that still had, it was like in kind of like a side account, and it had $300 in it. And I sat there and I was like, what do I do now? What do I do now? And like, some people are driven by intense amounts of pain, and that has them actually like really get into movement. Mm-hmm. And I'm one of those people that has been a lesson in life of like really hard lessons get me into action if I'm not paying attention. Yeah. And so in that moment, it was a choice. It was a 2 a.m. prayer. It was a like, where do I go now? And I got the clear message to give away my last $300 because I was needing $3,000 for a deposit for something for clients that had to happen in like 5 days after that. And so what I was asked at that moment was that you've turned everything over to me, everything over except for your finances. I was still holding so tight because I was so scared of the finances that was the one area I hadn't fully surrendered. And so I was asked to give away my last $300. And I remember hitting the button on the computer that night and being bold enough, and I think this is incredibly important, to stand in your vision and boldly ask and declare what you're ready to receive. And I boldly asked for giving away this last $300. Let it serve. I am unattached. I am releasing it. I am trusting in my abundance. And instead of asking for $3,000 in return, I'm asking for $30,000 in return. I boldly asked for a 100% return. When I asked for that, I just was like, just all in. I mean, you're at the breaking point of all in. And if I wouldn't have gotten the message the day before, that day I would have given up, guaranteed. Yeah. Guaranteed. So 7 days later, I had $30,000 in my bank account.
Wow.
7 days later, I created $30,000 in cash because I asked for it. I stood, I listened, I surrendered, and then I opened the door. And I tell people all the time, we have a closed door on our business, a closed sign on our business. And I opened and received and stood for it being possible. And I released the pressure and I just said, it's go time. Like there's no other choice at this moment other than going back to my job. And I knew that's not what I was being led to. So that was like one of the most critical moments of I can do this.
Wow. That is such a powerful story. And that is some next level trust. Like if that were being whispered in my ear, I don't know if I would have listened. Maybe now, but I always say that spirit whispers, then shouts, and then gives you the 2x4 upside the head.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so I try to listen to the whispers because I don't like the 2x4.
Yep.
But that is incredible that you listened. And I've heard, I think it was actually James Wedmore talk about this before, where he says, if you're down to your last $500, what should you do? And he says, give it away, because what would an abundant person do?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right? If you want to be that version of yourself that's wealthy and where $300 is nothing, then you give it away and you act as if you already are that person.
Yeah.
But then you also take aligned action, which you did, right? Yeah. The action of giving away the money, but then also I imagine you were showing up in your business.
Absolutely. I was in committed action for the next,
Yes.
7 days. And I had clients show up, and I had clients that I attracted in by how I was showing up, reaching out, all of those things. So
Yeah.
all of it worked. So I didn't just sit on my couch and meditate for the rest of the 7 days.
Yeah.
But I stood in it, I released it, and I was unattached to how and where it came in. And I think
Yeah.
that's so incredibly important. I didn't put all the pressure on this one client or whatever. And I just opened it up and said, it's go time,
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah. And what you were just saying about being unattached to the how, that's something really important that I want to be a part of these discussions around money, because often we come at money from the wounded masculine energy of, I need it to be this. I need to feel like I have control. So the money is going to come to me this way from this many clients that pay me this much. And the divine feminine says, I trust, I surrender the how, I will show up inspired and passionate and creative, and I'll do my piece, but I'm willing to relinquish the how it all comes back to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you're obviously in a different place now than you were then. How do you tell me what it looks like now, this relationship with God, this willingness to stand in your divine feminine and allow your business to grow in sort of magic and miraculous ways?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that we continue to build our intuition and our receiving muscles over time. And so the littlest whispers, when you start following them, then what happens is that every time you listen and follow, what I see is that God is saying, you are following, so now I can trust you with even bigger things. And so we're getting tested all the time with, what are we listening to? What are we willing to follow? I just the other day, I mean, it sounds like the simplest thing, but I was doing a meditation, and I felt this whisper come through that said, take your coffee maker and put it underneath your cabinet. Like, stop coffee for right now. And I had a cup of coffee sitting next to me, and I was like, did I really just hear this? And so, it's just coffee, right? And so I put it away. I poured my coffee out. I put it away, and I followed for like 6 or 7 days. And then after that, I started telling myself a story of like, oh, that's long enough. Like, it's no big deal. And every time I went to make the coffee for the next few days, every morning I would hear this voice be like, are we listening or are we not listening? Like, we've built up this relationship of faith and trust. Interesting that you're choosing not to follow right now,
Yeah.
So it sounds like such the smallest things, but what happened was I put the coffee maker back under after a few days of being out of integrity with my faith. I put the coffee maker back under and was like, I don't understand it, but I'm trusting it. And I just got this clear message that was, you don't see, again, kind of back to the steps, you don't see what this is connected to, but I can. You trusted me in other stuff. Can you just trust me with the coffee? And what was really interesting was it was 21 days that it was so crystal clear of having no coffee. And after the 21 days were up, there was just a day that there was no energy around coffee again. And I knew that I was okay to have it. But what was really interesting is, as I had a couple really big health moments come up during that time, so I could see it.
Yeah.
And so it was calling me to listen to my body.
Yeah.
And the coffee was covering up some of it.
Yeah.
And so there was something that I was really needing to listen to that was the iceberg diagrams that you see. There was something underneath that was affecting my vision, that was affecting me creating what I was being asked to recreate, that needed to surface for me to handle it. And it surfaced during that time. And so again, the 2x4 came in that time for something. And so now it's being handled. It's been talking to me for years, but it is a daily practice of listening, even when you don't understand, it doesn't make sense. And so I tune in every single day. It is a practice of tuning in and following all of the time. It has become something second nature to me. I don't second guess it anymore. I may resist it every once in a while, like I did with the coffee, but it drives my business. It drives what I do. It drives everything. And even for my business, right before COVID hit, I was doing journaling and, listening in. And I actually was given the message to stop all travel, to move my business locally, to focus on my family. And so even before COVID hit, I had already set up my calendar, my events, everything to be COVID friendly. Because Spirit guided me to that before it ever happened.
Yeah.
And so that relationship, that level of trust creates your abundance. It's freedom. And so it's really just about following that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say that the universe gives us the breadcrumb trail. Mm-hmm. Just like you were saying, that one step at a time. And it's true, because our ego would get in the way if we could see the big picture. Mm-hmm. We would screw it up somehow. And so we're just given that next step. And it's part of this playfulness, and it's part of us stepping into our highest self and co-creating, that we can be in that level of trust. Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely right. It often feels like small, silly things, or things that are totally unrelated, or things that seemingly feel counterproductive to growing the business.
So true. You know that so well.
I've really gotten the feeling and the urge and the energy to reorganize my kitchen. And it's like, well, this doesn't, it's going to be nice. It doesn't feel like it's going to grow my business. And then it's not until later, then you can see, oh, okay, that actually did play a role. How interesting. But when we allow ourselves to be in that relationship, it gets to feel so fun and playful. Mm-hmm. And we get to be surprised and delighted by our own business, mm-hmm. and by the outcomes of our own business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so fun, because it's so fun when you can release and allow yourself to be in the play of surprise.
Yeah.
Because so often we're controlling the way it's going to come in, what it's going to look like, all of those things. So we keep things out because we're trying to protect, we're trying to keep things in the box. So when we allow ourselves to step into, it's always for our highest good, even when it's messy, that I get to be surprised. And the universe loves to delight us. The universe loves to surprise us. Yeah. And when we allow for that, things can happen in such magical ways, and far better than we could have ever planned it. But we've got to surrender and trust in that. And that's usually the muscle that we have to start building and walking through. And sometimes they're tough lessons to learn, but it always ends up playing out way better than you ever could have imagined.
Yeah.
One of the things that you were talking about is revealing that next step. And I heard something the other day that I was like, it rang so true, that you're either shown the mountaintop or the next step on the trail. Never both. And a lot of times I am shown the mountaintop. And so then I'll be like, how the heck do I build to get to the mountaintop? Like, you've shown me this gigantic thing, but I don't know how to get there. And so that made so much sense to me, because some people it's revealed to them as the next step on the trail. Mm-hmm. Some people it's revealed as the mountaintop. Both of them are going to require a level of trust, but which trust is it for you that you get to sink into? So many times I'm not revealed the next step. I get to trust myself to take the step. The mountaintop's already there. I can see it. And that no matter what step I take, it's the right step, because the universe already has that handled. So other people they get to trust themselves to take that step and not need to know where it's leading.
Right.
And so whichever one you are, you're one of the two is showing up for you and
Yeah.
you're discounting it regardless. But I loved that analogy of it's either the mountaintop or the next step, one or the other. Both of them are
Yeah.
leading you to the same place.
Yeah, I love that too. And it's been such a shift in my own business to appreciate and have the entire outcome of the action be, I listened, and allow that to be enough, right? I followed the instruction. I did what felt good in that moment, period. Not, I did it, now where's the result?
Yes.
I did it, now was it actually the right thing? And it just feels so good to be in a place where there is no second guessing, and it's not a quid pro quo type of relationship. It's like, you know what? I got the inspiration, I felt the intuitional hit, and so I did it. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy that I did it, even though I was scared or even though I have no idea how it's actually going to benefit me.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things in what you're talking about is we get to change our success metrics.
Yes.
To where they're not all just results based. Yes, we get to look at our results, but our results are always feedback. It's not good. It's not bad. It's neutral. It's just letting us know what's working and what's not working. And so often our value is so our worth. And that's why, honestly, I am incredibly grateful that I walked through the financial devastation that I walked through, that I had never walked through, because I didn't realize how much my worth was still tied up in it.
Yeah.
And I found my power when I had nothing. That is actually when I found how powerful I was to create out of nothing. And there's zero part of me that would undo the pain that I walked through, because it taught me more than any other life lesson in that moment, because I realized just how powerful of beings we are. And that was incredible. So that goes back to why it's so incredibly important that our worth is never the bank account. Our worth is never the like result. All of that is feedback. All of that is dynamic. It changes all of the time.
Yes.
But we are still powerful, immeasurable beings. So the question is how did I show up today? Did I listen today? Did I serve today? All of those things. And if I'm doing that, the result is a natural byproduct, but we don't know when or how it may show up.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And, talking about uncoupling self-worth from income, if we believe that we were born inherently worthy and that our worth is limitless, right? Which oftentimes having faith, having a religious practice, a spiritual practice can help us reconnect to that. I also believe having children helps us reconnect to that, right?
Absolutely.
I look at my 3-year-old and my 6-year-old, and I'm not like, oh, well, you're only worthy today because you did X, Y, or Z. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yes.
Their worth is infinite, and it's been that way since the day they were born. And so we forget that applies to us. And then, this is an analogy that I like to use in order to help uncouple, which is like, if I went tomorrow and got a job bagging groceries at the grocery store, they're not going to look at me and say, oh, well, this is Emily Wilcox bagging groceries. And so therefore we need to pay her $200 an hour to do this work, right? They're going to pay me whatever the going rate is to bag groceries. If it's $15 an hour, that doesn't mean that I'm only worth $15 an hour, or that says something about me as a person. It says something about the value that's being placed on the work that I'm doing and the level of impact that I'm having, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like we can make that mean something about us, and normally we only make it mean negative things about us. We weaponize it.
We love to tell ourselves how awful we are.
Yeah. But on that note, so let's fast forward to today. Like, what does your business look like? How much are you making?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, the year after that was 170,000, right? The following year. So
You're
pretty
on a
much,
pretty good growth trajectory there.
yeah. So pretty much every year I was in anywhere from like a triple, quadruple every single year. And I still felt broke as a joke because all my debt had caught up to me and I was in a cycle and a spin. And so it was really difficult because it was like, I had to tell myself on a regular basis, I have created a 6-figure income. I've created more than what I had created in my job, in my corporate career. I was happier in my work. I was way more fulfilled. I was serving in all of those things. Yet my accounts and what it looked like was massively cash flow negative. And not because of the balance sheet, not because of my balance sheet being off, not because
right. Your current expenses were healthy. These were past expenses that you were having.
I had anywhere from a 40 to 60% profit margin. I was like very healthy from that standpoint. It was because there was so much that was catching up to me, and like past fees and so much debt and all of that I literally was just in the spin that I couldn't get out of. And so I felt tied in that. So what was really interesting was 2020 for me was a year that I then said, okay, this is the year that I go to $500,000, that I go to 500,000, this is the year that I'm going to do all of that. And so I set my sights on that, and I'm going to clear all my debt. I'm going to do all of this. It was so interesting because that was the COVID year. And what was fascinating about that is I ended up having a 500,000, actually I had a $600,000 year, and it wasn't from my business. So I was actually spiritually given the gift of space and abundance, and all of it came in other ways. I actually was given the space to clear out my house. My house sold on its own. Like it wasn't on the market. I was just thinking about selling it. But what had happened was I really just got the gift of the pause to put everything on hold.
Yeah.
And kind of like you've gone through, and I was just given that. And I started writing down, like, how could I create $100,000 and pay off all my debt, like overnight?
Yeah.
And everything in the next 24 hours started showing me my 401k. And that was something, I'll just be really honest, that's something that I was just like, I had been taught never, ever, 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 ever touch it. Like never touch it. And I carried a lot of shame around the rules of money from my past and from my family.
Yeah.
And then I remember having a day being like, it's really interesting that this is showing up. And all of a sudden I realized I had over $500,000 in my 401k. And I started looking at it, and I was like, wait a minute, the trajectory that I'm on for my business and what I'm creating and what I'm set out to do, I can make all this back really quick. So where is it in my past that I have to do it the hard way?
Yeah.
And live under the rules? And the universe is showing me this over and over and over. And so what was really interesting is that I just said yes to the easy button. I freed myself from that, knowing that I could make it and reinvest it in a year, no less, and be right back, plus have it be gone. My grandma ended up passing away that year, and I was given the gift to take 8 weeks, be by her side, sleep with her, at night, by her side, take care of her, transition her home. I didn't have to worry about finances. I didn't have to worry about my business. I didn't have to worry about anything. All of my debt was totally cleared out. My house sold on its own at that time. And then I was given the gift of living in her house immediately after that. So I was just given this space of like, the universe wants to take care of me. I'm meant to pause this year. It is a prep year. It is a clear out year. And it was like everything that I had walked through, I was given the gift of space, and I still manifested it. So last year was a really low revenue year for me from a business standpoint. And it was the highest abundant, most free space year. And so this year now I'm set up for a $500,000 in my business year.
Oh, I love everything that you shared. There's so much there because even though you had created your own business, so in many ways you weren't playing by other people's rules, when it came to the 401k, you still were. And things are revealed to me like that all the time, where it's like, oh, you think you're free, but you're really not free. Because you're not allowing yourself to consider all of the possibilities. And we create stories, as you said, shame around this, or, oh, that was a terrible financial decision. And it's like, I'll tell you what, I work with a wealth strategist. He hates 401ks. He thinks they're the most terrible thing ever and that they were invented by Wall Street to make those guys rich.
Yep.
So it's like, what truth do we choose to live by? And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that I was listening to something the other day that resonated with me so profoundly, and it was, especially the people closest to us, that they want to keep us safe, they want to protect us, and they're operating under the rules of someone else's wounds. And so theirs is through the lens of someone's wounds. And so when we listen to that and we hear that that's the right way, it's actually many times, and that's back to your wounded masculine, many times it's from a wound or a fear that's coming out of, and it's coming from a place of love, protection and all of that. But it's not necessarily from a place of like the freedom and for the highest and any of that. And so I've had to really use my filter and stand in my decisions, especially with my parents who, like, I'm operating under, I'm the crazy kid. And so I scare them on a regular basis and have walked through stuff. They're just like, I don't think I couldn't handle the risk that you've walked through, but they've also been amazed at how I could handle it, the courage, they just admire that piece. And you've got to have both. You got to have both. And what I've noticed is when I stand in my decision, they back off.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's like the less wobbly we feel, it provides comfort to those who love us and just want us to be okay. Yeah. And I think ultimately, because many entrepreneurs struggle with this, our parents, we can still receive their love and they don't have to understand what we do. So it's our inner child sometimes that's still looking for the approval and is almost wanting to make sure that they're okay. When really, if we can just make sure that we're okay, then everybody wins. Going back to what you shared about 2020, because there's so much good stuff to unpack, I just want to acknowledge you for being open and receptive, really standing in the divine feminine. This is something that I've been working with some women inside of my Money Moves program about, which is opening ourselves up to the possibilities. We brainstorm all of the ways that money can flow to us. Because often we're not even making ourselves energetically available for an inheritance, for a home to be gifted to us, all of these different things, because we're still operating from a place of really just wanting to control and feel safe. And so we think, well, money is going to flow through my business and it's going to come to me in just this one way. And so that's what we're an energetic match for. And spirit says, oh, okay, all right. If this is the only place where you're not going to resist money, then this is the way it will come. But as soon as we release resistance to it coming to us from other ways, and we allow ourselves to receive without having this weird story around whatever it could have been, right? That like, oh, well, grandma had to die in order for this to happen, or bringing shame and unworthiness into the equation, what it feels like to me is you were like, what a gift. What a gift for everyone. A gift for me, a gift for my grandmother that I got to be there, how abundant that I had time and money flowing in. Like, this is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. And I think back to a time when, I think back to a specific time when I received something, I manifested something that I'd been dreaming about for years. And then because it didn't come in the way that I expected, and it didn't come in from my business, I was in like self-loathing and couldn't enjoy it, even though the outcome was better and I couldn't see it at the moment. Yeah. And so I was in self beat up and self judgment. And so last year got to be the experience of like, wow, how amazing that I set this intention. It didn't happen at all like I planned. It ended up being more abundant, and the gifts from it were so huge. And there was no part of me that was in self beat up that was like, you didn't work your business that year. You didn't do, you're behind. There was no part of that. Like, I was just in the gift of like, wow, this was amazing. I got to release everything in my life, including my debt. I got to massively receive, and I got to serve in one of the most privileged moments of helping someone experience the most sacred death I've ever seen. Yeah. And have that gift. And that's something I would never, ever, ever want to take back. And so that is abundance at its highest. Yeah. Yeah. So calling in this $500,000 year this year, which feels so fun. And already from our conversation, we know we're not going to say how, right? Right. Because the how is not your responsibility, and it gets to be fun and playful. But I do want to hear what does feel fun and playful for this year, both in the ways that you're serving and ways that money could flow in. Mm-hmm. You bet. So I was actually woken up, you ever have those nights? And I always tell people, and I was telling this story the other day, and somebody was like, man, I have those nights, and it's really interesting. I'm not listening, because it was 3:00 in the morning that I got woken up, and I'm tossing and turning. And I just remember being like, God, what are you trying to tell me? Like, if I'm woken up now, but how often do we not ask that question? How often do we toss and turn? We ignore, we go get a drink, we try to, figure out how to go back to sleep, whatever it is. But I've just started listening. Like, if I get woken up in the middle of the night, something's trying to talk to me. And so it was go get a notebook and a pen. And so I went and got a notebook and a pen, and I just started writing. And my entire program that I'd been thinking about was named, was laid out, was like all the pieces in my head. And there was a couple things that hadn't made sense. And I'd been asking for a few days, like, there's just a couple things that don't seem like they're fitting based off of what I had so far. So I was like, open me up to what I'm not seeing. And I've been given a vision for my branding for Grace on Fire. That's like, that is the thing, Grace on Fire, and creating a truly like a ministry, not a religious-based ministry, but a ministry for women to step into their faith, to be courageous enough, bold enough to fully step into their legacy, and that they are grounded in their spiritual transformation, they're grounded in their intuition, and they operate with that spiritual compass. And I'm very nature-based, so I teach off of nature. And so I've had this idea of the Grace on Fire brand, but I wanted this program that could teach spiritual intuition off of nature signs. And so I teach off of the ocean, I teach off of the mountains, I teach off of owls and eagles and those types of things. And how do I hear the voice of God as well? All of it. And so I had this program come in that was so exciting, because it's called Sacred Soul Leadership. It's 4 months of a spiritual transformation program that leads you from the beginning of it's called the grounding, and the end of it's called ignite, where you go all the way through from the anchor, the path, the elevation, the compass, the fire, and then ignite your legacy leadership, all by being grounded in your spiritual transformation. So that is what sounds incredibly fun for me, is running that program, which is retreat experiential as well as teaching, because I love teaching. And I get to serve 100 women this year. And so I don't know how I'm going to reach them all. I don't know how, all of those things. And then everything is under the Grace on Fire mission of building the Grace on Fire woman. And so that's what I'm just incredibly excited about, creating this movement, this community of women to be supported in this way. And they literally have unstoppable, unwavering faith in their mission and step boldly in, and they get to be fulfilled and on fire. So
I love it. And I feel on fire. I feel the energy coming from you, and it just feels so aligned. And I remember when you got the word ministry, and it was like, oh, yes, that's exactly what Keri's doing.
Yeah.
So,
and I was resisting it. I told you guys, I was like resisting it because there was this little piece of me that's like, I don't want to be known as that. So that whole like label, title, all of those things was in my energy because what I had made it mean. Yeah. And it was just like, no, that's what I'm being asked to be.
Yeah. To well, and it's funny that we resist the things that are so obvious to everyone else, right? Yeah. As soon as you shared, man, I'm really feeling this word ministry, all of us were like, oh, yes. Uh-huh. That's exactly right.
Constant vibration, clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go.
And I had that too, where I was like, I'm feeling really called to coach. I don't know what it is yet. And then it was like, it got a little more clear. And I was like, oh, it's around money. And I finally got the courage to tell one friend, and she was like, duh. Like, yes, Emily, that's what it is. So it's like others can see it in us often before we can fully own and see it in ourselves.
Absolutely.
But I am so excited for Grace on Fire and for the Sacred Soul leadership. Like, that's going to be incredible. And I know that everyone listening is going to want to follow along and see you build this and launch it and maybe participate as well. So can you please share the best ways to follow you?
Yeah, really the best way is Facebook. I always tell people that's where I'm active the most. That's the best way to, interact with me. That's the best place. The other place is LinkedIn, and then also Instagram. And all of it's under Keri Stanley or Keri Stanley Coaching, one or the two. And so
and Keri's Keri.
Yes, I always say for those of you old enough, it is like the lotion that Keri is so very lotion that used to be in, all the stores. I don't even know if it still exists, but that's what it reminds me of. But some of you listening may not be old.
It's going over my head, but hey, I grew up under a rock, in a very rural town. So
I did too. So yeah, but it is Keri and then Stanley, Stanley. So.
Awesome. So go follow Keri. And Keri, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. This conversation has been such a joy, and it's expanded me in so many ways as well. So I just really, really appreciate it.
You're so welcome, Emily. And it's like our relationship's such a gift because we weren't in the mastermind together. And so we got to really build our relationship afterwards. And I love how the universe works in that way and brings us together in different ways. And the perfect people are just placed in our life, and we can just run with it, accept it. And I feel like I've known you way longer than I've known you. And I'm so incredibly, it's such a gift. And I'm so grateful for what we've already been able to create, but specifically for what you are in the world, how you show up and what you're bringing to the table. It is beautiful and sacred. And the trust that you have to bring this message out and follow is incredible. And so I'm supporting everything that you do.
Thank you so much. I receive.
Yay!
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. Changing the way we think, feel, and talk about money will change the world. I truly believe that. It starts with you tuning in, and it spreads when you share this show on Instagram and Facebook and tag me at mmakesmoney. And you know what moves the needle the most? Taking just a minute to leave a 5-star review on iTunes. This show isn't free to produce, so let's multiply those dollars invested to help this show reach a bigger audience each week. Thank you so much for your help. I really appreciate it. And lastly, if you want more connection, more M Makes Money style riffs, and a safe place on the internet to talk about money, jump into my free Facebook group, The Money Club. It's linked in the show notes. Until next time, I'm wishing you health, happiness, and boatloads of money.